Welcome to Noon Hour Slides from the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery. We're located on Treaty 4 territory, the traditional lands of the Blackfoot, Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We pay our respects to First Nations and Métis ancestors and reaffirm our relationship with one another. We gratefully acknowledge funding from the City of Moose Jaw, Sask Culture, Saskatchewan Lotteries, Canada Council for the Arts, Canadian Heritage, and the Government of Canada. I'm Vincent Hotelling, the Administrative Assistant here. I'm here to welcome you to today's presentation. Byron and Crabb is here to talk about New Zealand. Welcome.
Well, hi and welcome everybody. Beth and I left Canada from at Vancouver Airport, and that was on February the 11th, 2016. And we saw this beautiful sculpture in the Vancouver Airport, and we went to a land that's got a lot of beauty too. Now, New Zealand is two islands, and Aotearoa is New Zealand. And I don't take responsibility for any of the pronunciations I do of any places that we can't. There's the North Island, as they call it, the Cook Strait, and then the South Island. And it is the land of ferns, and they adulate the fern. The bonga is the silver tree fern, so 10 meters tall, and the silver fronds, the bonga is the national emblem. And there's one of them there. Our friend Carolyn looking up at it to get an idea just how big that the bonga is. The underside of the fern leaf is the silver, and very, very beautiful. New Zealand has a surreal natural beauty. It has a very high quality of life and is certainly one of the safest countries in the world to visit. It has this geothermal areas, very prominent, beautiful valleys. We see water everywhere, lakes with mountains in the background, and hiking trails, they call them tracks, are everywhere with beauty around. And the unique thing is the wingless birds. Flightless, yeah, not wingless. They have wings, but they don't have the flight feathers. They don't have a keel on their breast, which would allow the deep flight muscles to form. And they have beautiful beaches. And ferns are everywhere. These ferns here are like at least 7 feet long, each of them. So we landed in Auckland and immediately hit north, but I just had to stop because Beth had to get her feet wet in the ocean. And that's the South Pacific Ocean that she's feeling the joy of. We met our friends Peter and Carolyn from Weyburn, and they had been on a week sailing trip with friends and family beforehand. So we, naturally in New Zealand, they have the driving on the opposite of what we do. They drive on the left side, the steering wheel's on the right side. And it's quite a thing. There's hardly any stop signs anywhere. And there's all roundabouts. So it's quite the thing. You turn to the left on a roundabout instead of a right on the roundabout. Quite amazing. And this picture I took for a purpose because of the windshield wipers in it. Because of the instruments are also on the wrong side. When I turn the left turn signal on, the windshield wipers started to flap. And they laughed and laughed at me. But as everybody drove, everybody managed to do that. We camped our way there, as you can see. It wasn't long before I had the binoculars out and looking for birds in the many varied, such as this fantail sitting there flicking and flicking his big tail. Most of the campgrounds are equipped with camp kitchens and the likes, and they had stoves outside. Sometimes they had barbecues. They're really equipped for outdoor living, and outdoor life in New Zealanders is wonderful. Story with this is they have eco security at the airport. They don't have any poisonous snakes or other insects like spiders or whatever else. And they must be trying to keep everything else out, so they sprayed the tent down. It took about 3/4 of an hour before we got it back, which was in the airport, yeah. And then 3 days later, when we got poured on and very wet, they removed all the seam seal. So we got some seam seal and put it on, but it was so sticky that we couldn't back it up, or else have the place come out like it's been full of gum. And we used baby powder to stick to the sticky stuff until it dried up. Looks funny, but we survived and it worked after that. One of the places we're traveling north was this, they called it 1,000-kilometer highway, and it's just the sandy beach, and they traveled on there to avoid this traffic, and I think they likely had fun racing. One of the first places we camped, a beautiful beach like this, huge areas. We saw our first flightless birds. The
Oviparra.
no, Parahi, I believe. Anyway, so colorful, and it's sort of like a water hen was what the Maori name meant. We had a bird with black bill, which is black bill gull, and a white bill, or red bill, and a red bill gull. There was a pied crow because of the white added to it, and a Caspian tern. Walking the beach was a joy, and there's these beautiful big boulders everywhere. You see the lichen on them as the tides went back out, and the oyster catchers were chasing each other around. The next day we hiked around the same beach and saw this huge tree grove, or what we thought was that. We went inside, and that whole thing is one tree. It was, yeah, and they called it a fig tree, but I didn't see any figs. But anyway, it was very beautiful underneath it, and it's like we had our own dance floor. Looking out from under there, I could see these little creatures from Canada behind the pebbles on the beach. To save going around a long way, we took this little ferry across and saw that they have murals there like the murals of Moose Jaw. And
Can I just share for a second? While we were on that ferry, we got chatting with some of the other people there, and one car was absolutely full of beautiful flowers, and we were chatting with them, and they said, oh yes, they were going to someone's home for a weeding. We thought, oh, weeding? But you've got all these flowers. Yeah, later we figured it out. They were the florist, and they were bringing the flowers to a wedding. But, you know, yes, it's English, but it's a little different. So we had a few moments of that, getting our translations correct.
after the ferry, we went to Opine, and there was these sand dunes, which are the same as the huge as the sand dunes in Saskatchewan here. Now we got a campsite near the Kauri tree forest area, and found a wild hedgehog crossing the lawn. And they have slime mold and all different things showing the richness of their environment for fungus and molds and the rest. It's so important in keeping the fertility of the soil. The Kauri forest area here, the Kauri tree is one of the most ancient of trees, and it's the longest living Kauri tree in New Zealand. Oh, it's not moving again. This is supposed to be the grandpa, and they're talking about him, but he's likely over 2,000 years old. And to be in his presence really was amazing. There was just such energy to it. There we go. Such energy to it. You can see us standing on the stand in front of him. It really quite awe-inspiring. I'm very glad we went there. The bark is quite different than anything that we have. And the tree goes up quite tall and then just branches, not like the redwood forest in California. These ones, as the walkabout that we had, were called the Three Sisters. Beautiful, beautiful trees, beautiful area to be. The energy in the woods is wonderful. At Matakone, they had a museum and give you an appreciation of the trees. They basically stopped all the harvest of them now. And you can see how beautiful the wood was, why it would be such a treasured thing when they were harvesting it. They also had there one of the world's biggest butter churn. You can imagine how many pounds of butters came out of one of the manufacturings from that. Okay, we were still traveling south, so we go from campsite to campsite, and there may be 300 or 400 kilometer difference in there. This is the Adelaide and Goat Island Marine Reserve, and they had a beautiful interpretive area there. We got so much information about the flora and fauna. We were going to be swimming here, but there'd been a storm and it was so stirred up, they said we wouldn't see anything, and they were worried about undertow, so we didn't go swimming there, but definitely a beautiful place to stop, see the information and have our lunch. Traveling further, we saw things like white shags, which are our cormorants. There's the spur-winged plover. And of course, always flowers. Those of you who knows flowers maybe knows what these are. And the greenery in this brush or whatever it is, it looks like some kind of cedar, was the most brilliant green I think that I've ever seen. Now we camped at where was there? Miranda Holiday Park, and there was the Miranda Holiday Shorebird Center, and we hiked into there, and they had hides and the rest, and we saw so many different birds. There was like the godwits and pectoral sandpipers, fox-tailed godwits, sharp-tailed sandpipers, and went on and on. They weren't close enough that we were getting pictures of them, but we spent a wonderful time there before we went back to camp. I don't know what significance of the lizard is, but they didn't have anyone with a crab in it, so we accepted the place to stay anyway. Then we went on to the Rotorua, and this is one of the most visited areas in New Zealand because of the geothermal activity there and the Maori settlements. You can see where the hot tumbling water is leaving the sediment and painting the rocks all these colors. The thermal pools, this one puts 40 to 50 liters per second out at a temperature of 98 degrees Celsius. So it's small reason that it's steaming around us like it is. We stayed at this place. We used the hot pool and the shower, and had the beautiful flow of the hot water coming down. We went to the Wakaharawarawa. I told you it was tough. The living Maori village, and they did the haka, H-A-K-A, their warrior dance. To they use it before their football games and different things. They used to be the warriors to intimidate the opposition. Unfortunately, I turned the sound off and I turned the video on, but get you an idea how loud they were. And I'll tell you, there were some very intimidating people there. The mud pools are a part of it. When they get put up, and as the settlers came and told them they had to move, they would always go to the geothermic areas, and they say that many of them will bathe in the mud every day as a part of their culture. They had the beautiful museum area showing the artwork that they're very famous for. Now we get trying to understand their symbolisms. This didn't work. Anyway, you can see when you're happy and when you're sad, and I'm confused. Quite a neat shirt. Anyway, as we kept going, we found more places to hike. This is the, we're heading towards Lake Taupo, and okay, toward Lake Taupo. Anyway, we did a hike into this area here, and this, yeah, the Wahatapapa Valley. There we go. And this almost the hedges there. The walk was here, and you see there wasn't the forest, and as in many places. And then we get into it. You look down, you see different types of flowers. The creeks were also beautiful, the rocks and the lichens, and some incredible waterfalls with a different colored rock. Then we went further to, we're heading towards,
So,
towards Wellington and the ferry, but the other place was Lake Topo. I guess we got there, sorry. And we did this hike around the little lake that was there, and it showed these ferns and that up high in the tree branches. And then you look down, there's a little damselfly. And we were lucky enough this, well, I don't know what we got for time. And this is the New Zealand pigeon, and it is huge. And you can see from here, the size of his head is the size of our pigeons here. So you see the body, and I'd say it's as big as a raven. And when they fly, there's just such noise from its wings. Beautiful, beautiful bird. Continuing around this lake, we saw more of these, and these fern-like things would fall off, and they're littered along the walking path, and they likely weighed 60, 80 pounds, so it would have been a disaster if they hit us. Yeah, they're a saprophytic fern that living on the other trees. Stopped here for lunch as we finished our walk around this lake. This shows the winding roads. The roads are either going up, turning right, turning left, or going over a pass, or going down through a valley. And it was perpetual through all of New Zealand. Along the way, we'd stop and see the mountains in the distance, the prairie land here, valleys, and more mountains. So we got to Wellington, and this is where we're going to take the ferry to the South Island. But they have the famous the Te Papa Museum, and it was just so huge, but they had all the information on the Maori history. There was even a earthquake room, and that was scary to think that you would live through an earthquake, which
really gave you the feeling.
yeah, you had the feeling of the being in an earthquake. We got lost several times trying to travel to the cable car and the gardens, and Peter were looking and Carolyn were looking for us, and we spent about an hour and a half in the gardens alone looking for each other, but finally got there. They're a beautiful botanical garden in the middle of the city. So we left Wellington and we got the ferry across to the South Island, and you can see it's just like being on the ferry to Vancouver Island. And we landed in Picton, and then we went to the little Kita Beach Holiday Park. And here we're camping and had a little bit of fun. Camping just the sun doing away from the South Pacific Ocean. And you could hear the waves murmuring all night. And they had a convention of seagulls the same place. Traveling down the slow down down the ocean highway. There was this narrow gauge railway, and it's still in use. As we're traveling along, you can see how close we are to the edges all the time, and never did fall off. Stop and you look down and you can see fur seals sunning themselves on the beaches. As we got to Christchurch, and this is one of the first trees we saw. Don't know the name of it, but definitely beautiful. This is Christchurch, and how far they've got with the cathedral, how far they've got with the renovations. The earthquake was in 2010 and 2011, and we're here in 2016. This is the cathedral with the earthquake in 1888. You can see the top of the tower just went off there. But they were so busy working there, and they made this sculpture, and I'm not quite sure what it means, and it's right beside where the church is. They had a Japanese earthquake architect come and made this
Cardboard.
yeah, cardboard cathedral. And it is a functioning church for them now. Really interesting thing is Restart, and a part of the city that the merchants got tired of them. You can see all the cranes and that of being so slow at refurbishing the businesses and that got damaged, that they started repurposing the crates that, what do we call them?
Containers.
Yeah, the containers, that shipping containers, and made beautiful buildings out of them. They sold all their products and everything else. And it was a way of getting back into business and not having to wait for the construction of the main part of the city. There was a lot of damage done. They have the beautiful murals there like we have in Moose Jaw. The Avon River runs through the middle of the city, and very beautiful. You could take boat rides through it. When you're in the botanical gardens, you could see a honeybee doing its thing, getting fed and spreading the nectar. They're so essential to our life. Those of you who like flowers like to know what those are. From there, we went to Akaroa and the Banks Peninsula. And the drive there was so difficult and windy roads, but it was beautiful when we got there with this turquoise inlet. Peter loved the marina, and we got on the penguin and dolphin tour. But before that, we got information about eating down on the wharf. And as Beth, you can say,
That was the best fish and chips ever.
they came right off the boat, they cleaned them there, and then they were prepared for us, and a beautiful thing. So this is a little blue penguin, and we'll talk about that more. That's the only viewing we saw of it in the water. And these are the Hector dolphins with the gray stripes on it. The significant thing, as you can see, is this rounded dorsal fin, and they're the only dolphin that has that. As we went around, they also took us to an area, it's supposed to be the oldest chunk of earth that visible in earth for some reason. And there were sea lions there besides. So after that, we took the summit road out and to see where we had been, and the sheep on the hills, and there's a lot of sheep in New Zealand. The ewe obviously had been shorn, but whenever in a short time ago. And we're looking back at the lake from here, and you can see the village where we were. The scenery up top was beautiful. And the flowers there. Does anybody know what flowers these are? Anyway, the view from the top and the peninsula was wonderful. So we're still camping, and we've camped the whole time. Like I say, we may travel 300 or 400 kilometers to get to the next campsite, but the bees were still there. With this one, Lake Takapu. Yeah, there was the observatory. And so we went up to see it. Of course, you can't see anything during the daytime, but the coffee shop there made pretty appropriate type of designs on the cappuccinos. The weather and the fog had cleared up quite a bit. So Peter and Carolyn and I hiked our way back, and Beth drove the car back. She was having problems with plantar fasciitis, and walking was becoming a problem. But you can see how beautiful our campsite at Lake Takapo was, with the beautiful colored water that is there. On the way back, it was really barren and dry right there, and I saw this little harebell, same as ours, and I assumed from the high winds and the sun that it lost all its blue color. There was a lot of invasion with the tussock grass and the rest, which are very nutritional for the sheep. You can see the sheep in this area didn't seem to be thriving that much. And they had invasive species of bush here, and I don't have the name of it, but it's like us with our purple loosestrife or the leafy spurge, and a problem to be contended with because they're virtually impossible to get rid of. So then we traveled on to Mount Cook, and on the way, of course, is Lake Pukaki. This beautiful, beautiful turquoise lake was well worth the stop. This is Mount Cook in the distance, the one with the cloud blowing over the top of it, and it never seemed to not have that. We proceeded to do the Hucker Valley Track. They call them tracks, we call them hiking paths. It was debatable whether we should or not because it was 80 to 100-kilometer winds. And we would walking down this thing across these bridges and then across the river again. But the hike in was just glorious. We enjoyed all the varied vegetation and getting there. As we got nearer to Mount Cook, and we never got anywhere near the base, but you could see this big cloud scooting across the top of it. And it never stopped doing that the whole time we were there. It's certainly a beautiful sight to see. And of course, in the alpine areas is the alpine flowers, and equally beautiful. Beth will tell you about this little suspension bridge.
Going across this bridge, and you can see from my head that I have my scarf tied right completely over my hair because the wind was so horrible. And I thought, I'm never going to be able to comb it again. Anyway, got to the middle of this bridge, and I am hanging on because it's a suspension bridge. It's moving up and down as you go. I was hanging on with both hands in the middle while that bridge literally bucked in the wind, and my feet were lifted off at several different times. So it was quite the experience.
On the way back, though, we saw some friends from Canada. And we saw a something shell duck.
Okay.
We enjoyed this tour, the hike into Mount Cook very, very much. So back to the little blue penguin. These little birds, we got on the tour for it, and they go out to the sea to fish all day long. And at night when it gets cold, or not cold, but dark, they come back in a raft to the edge and they wait there until it's dark enough and brave enough, and then they scurry up to their burrows and nests. And we were allowed to be in there. They had a tent set up with infrared light, and so we could see them making their journey up. One got lost and came through the retaining fence and trotted around us for a little while, which was wonderful. They're only about 13, 14 inches long and weighed just over a couple of pounds, so there's like a fat mallard duck. And we talked about flightless birds. Penguins are flightless birds, and I guess I've never even thought of that, but they do fly through the water. Certainly, we saw somebody said that these, what Beth thinks is a torch flower, even in BC, but they're definitely worth a stop and to get a few pictures of them. We then went to Amaru and saw this steampunk sculpture. And the city itself was, you can see this, the front on this building here too. The city itself was full of these old type buildings, and a very enjoyable visit as a side trip.
Almost like our downtown.
Almost like downtown Moose Jaw, yeah. From there, we went to the Otago Peninsula near Dunedin and the Orokonui Conservation Eco Sanctuary. And then this is up in the cloud forest, and this is what's here. They have built a stainless steel fence around this 8.5 kilometer reserve to try to protect the endangered species there. Cost them over $2 million. We had a biologist take us on the tour and telling us about the flora, the fauna, and it was very intriguing. Then they had walks around and set up feeder stations. This is the tui bird, who's got the most beautiful song. We heard them the whole time we were in New Zealand, and they have these little white feathers hang off the throat. They also are like a mimic and make different grunts and other calls too, but a most enjoyable bird. You can see the coloring is almost like our grackles where there's iridescence in the feathers. The kaka is a native parrot and very busy feeding around. And he's notorious for ripping bark off the trees and damaging trees a lot. This one is one of the nearly extinct birds, and I've lost his name and haven't been able to find it again. But a peculiar looking bird. This fellow's very interesting too. He's a tuatara, and apparently they've been around for over 200 million years. They were with the time of the dinosaurs. And they've been they're only on the one island in the south part of New Zealand. And these ones have been here and they're trying to establish a colony. They can live up to 100 years and they only breed every 2 or 3 years. And hopefully they can get their numbers to come up. They can release them into the wild more. And there were skinks in the same type of environment. There we got tickets to get into the Albatross Center in the Tajo Peninsula, and that's near Dunedin. You know, we got to see, I think, 3 females with a chick. We're at a hive that was provided for the interpretive center. And at the interpretive center, there was videos showing these birds and all the factors about them. As Beth said, their feathers are so close to their body, you would think they were carved out of a white porcelain type of material. They have a wingspan of about 3 meters, so they're well equipped for soaring and feeding out in the ocean. It was a neat place to go. So we're continuing on our travels, just showing everywhere there were cyclists on these hilly, winding roads with no shoulders. I don't know how they have survived, and they must have legs of steel. We're always seeing in the flat areas, and you can see the grass a little greener here than up on the hills.
More sheep.
More sheep, yeah. And the old fence lines covering with lichen, very picturesque. There's always flowers to enjoy. Now we made it to, where are we here now? Lake Manapuri Holiday Park, and it was really a quirky place, and the owner actually was quite quirky too, but they have these little huts for rent. And we, of course, were tenting, but he also had a building totally preserved for the pinball machines that he had collected. Peter, who used to sell these things, was a wizard, and you can see the entertainment. We saw him leaping and jumping around so that the ball wouldn't get away on him. Then came Manapuri. We're going down to Doubtful Sound, and you have to go across Lake Manapuri. That's about a 50-minute ride in a big boat. And this is the drainage part from the Manapuri power station. And the interesting thing here, because of the strong eco movement and the rest, it was basically totally built underground in the mountain to have minimum impact on the environment around it. This is the largest hydroelectric plant in New Zealand, and it's actually the 2nd largest power plant that they have there. And you can see from that there's minimal impact on the ecosystem for such a heavy going power plant. It was established for power for an aluminum smelting plant, but I don't know if it's still going. From there we go to a favorite of our whole trip, and that's Doubtful Sound. We had to go across Lake Manapuri and then by truck to get close to the boat that was taking us on it. There's good reason it's known as Pattaya, place of silence, and that just proved out to be so true. This is the first view that we saw of Doubtful Sound, and then I drove down and got in past the waterfalls, Pictures can't do it justice because it's the feeling of being there. We drove around like over 150 kilometers enjoying the scenery.
On the boat.
On the yeah, on the boat, not drove around, sailed around, and they would let us out in the kayaks, and then go ahead and you'd paddle up for 1 or 2 kilometers, so you get a totally different feel and view of the Doubtful Sound. And the pictures are different from the waterway, and you get a chance to see our boat. Interesting thing is, right in here is where the washroom was, because all the accommodation is down underneath. And inside there was 11 of us here. We were from Great Britain, the USA, China, Switzerland, and of course, Canada. They fed us incredible meals. Chris was our captain, and Clara was the cook and crew person. We got to do some fishing, little red rockfish, and he got some blue cod that we were able to eat with a venison supper. These are crayfish, which I believe are rock lobsters, and then he had lobster traps he would pick up every time he had a crew in there, and then that would be the food for the next day. During the travels, we came to near the opening to the Tasman Sea and saw the beautiful scenery and the rainbow. There was just beauty around us all the time. Another highlight was the dolphins following the boat, playing around us, peeking at us, leaping out of the water. We saw a Fiordland crested penguin. Didn't get a chance to get a picture, so this picture's off a postcard. At night, you didn't see the sunsets, like the beautiful sunsets we have around Moose Jaw here, but it got really dark. And here's Beth's experience.
On our little cruise into Doubtful Sound, of course, in the middle of the night, I have to use the washroom. So up I go to the main deck of the boat and then to the back where there's no canopy overhead. And the stars stopped me in my tracks. They felt, I've never seen them so bright, and they felt like I could just grab them. They were so close and huge. Quite the experience.
Nice to re-experience it.
Mm-hmm.
So as you can see, we were very pleased with the Doubtful Sound journey that we took. There is a Milford Sound is the most popular one, but Robin Les Donnelly told us about this, and for just us being on there, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Traveling on, we did see some of the wild red deer that are native, and this shows how the road snaked along the edges, those shoulders or whatever else, and just about all the driving that we did. I told you we were camping, and when we were coming here, we thought with all our stuff, we heard we could reserve a station wagon, but I didn't know they came in mini sizes. Anyway, getting our stuff stuck into the back of this van every year was like trying to redo a Rubik's Cube, but you can see we're smiling because we made it this day too. Another thing that's unique, if you look at the sign here with the black arrow, it means on the bridge, they have the right of way. So we had to pull over and let this travel van and the other traffic go by before we could go over it. That wasn't too onerous, but when you see bridges this long, you can see how much money they've saved in not building big, expensive bridges like we have two ways. But if you see in there partway through, they had little like saddlebags where you could pull off and not have to back up the whole way. I don't know if you've ever been over gutter bars. I think we call them rumble strips, yes. And we thought we'd found another park, the Trundler Park. And thanks for returning your Trundler. This was at the grocery store. This is the morning, and we traveled on. We're still let's get that. we're going to Fox Glacier, so in the morning from our campsite, this is a beautiful view of the mist hanging over the lake there. And this is some of the rock outfit croppings and that on the way. But we walked into the Fox Glacier, and in 6 years, it's retreated over two kilometers. And you can see it's quite big. You can see the little people at the bottom there. It's unfortunate that this is a worldwide phenomenon with the melting of these things. The red lichen on the rocks on our trip up there, our walk up there, were really quite beautiful. Got this picture of these ferns and the rest of that because we had to walk back from our campsite to town to see the glowworm walk. And they were in these edges and dead trees and the likes of that. And it was such a treat to see. There's about 3 or 4 places in all of New Zealand that you can see them, but it was quite ethereal to have all this blinking going on around you in the dark of night. We camped near Lake Matheson, and Beth and I drove out there that evening to see this view, but we didn't see it because we had these mountains. So this view I cheated and got from a postcard. There's Mount Cook in the reflection. There's a hike all around the lake, but we did manage to see a hawk, the only one I saw on the trip. Again, there was more sheep, and there was all the different flora and fauna. The next morning we went there.
You're okay.
We went there for breakfast, and again the cappuccinos were very appropriately decorated, as was the fern art on the walls in the cafeteria. The hike around
Lake Matheson.
yeah, Lake Matheson, the trees, the moss on the trees. It was there was just so much to see everywhere you went, but nature is part of them. The next day we traveled inland for quite a while, saw more mountains, then we went back along the shoreline and saw different views, the sea stacks, place to pull off the incredible decorative trees, and another one of the dewy bird with his white necklaces. The scenery is forever changing, as were the flowers and flora and fauna. We got to Pancake Rock, and this is near where we camped. You can see where it got its name, and I think there was an awful lot of fry pans to get that many pancakes cooked. It's quite an attractive place. And here's another one that isn't as smoothly done when there's a little kiosk bird sitting on the top of it. The eroded rocks are always pretty. These ones look like they'd be down at south of us here.
Oh, at the Big Muddy.
Yeah, the Big Muddy. Could be. Anyway, it was endless beauty as we went along. We hiked what is called the Truman Track and came upon this beach. It was quite a walk down to it. Peter and Carolyn went down, but the beauty was just outstanding. When we were leaving, we stopped and got this picture of the same area from the highway. Never wrong to get a picture of a sunset. So we're traveling along, we're seeing the coastal areas, and then we're crossing over and recrossing rivers and creeks everywhere. And we got to the Tortunahui Bay.
Oh, wait,
Oh, wait, no.
sorry. We're only at Kaiterra.
Yeah, we went to the Motu'ika Highway to Kaiterra Beach Camp. I said you'd have to pardon me for these words. Anyway, this is the biggest camp that I've ever seen. They even had streets with street signs so you could try to find your tent. I don't know if there's 200 or 300 sites there. Very crowded and good facilities. We got fish and chips, and this was the scenery we had while we were eating them. But we got information there that we could go up to Tortunahui Bay, which is a couple-hour drive, and it was not very good road, but we did that. We saw some hops fields as we went along, more peculiar rock bases, huge valleys, and a natural driveway through of the rock where we stopped for another cappuccino and saw this huge stingray, which was a real bonus. Getting to this bay was just so beautiful. There was basically us there. The beach was so incredible. Great place to sit and read. And if you look at the rocks way off there, Beth's got something to say about that.
While Byron was having a nap that afternoon, I decided to do a snorkel out to those far rocks and saw several different kinds of fish, three different kinds of starfish, some sea urchins, sand dollars, and a manta ray. So there was such rich diversity of their underwater life. So I'm not actually just lazing there, I'm warming up in the sun after that snorkel.
Another thing that's in the guidebooks is sand flies. And we saw them on just about all the beaches we went to. Yeah. When you get 50 or 60 bites on your ankles and feet, like I did, and they were itchy for at least a week, it was pretty significant that we were warned about them. So you can see the beautiful campsites that we had. We had the camp robber there, and he hung around and he'd be in our stuff, we'd chase him away and he'd be right back again. He's a Weka, W-E-K-A. This is the first time in all our camping that we had a campfire. When we canoe, we lived by the campfire, but that was our only opportunity. This is part of the Abel Tasman Track Great Hike. Peter and Carolyn did a day hike and we just went up and saw this. They had the traps out for the possum, which is their biggest predator, and the stoat, which is our weasel. But the view up there was stupendous. And more ferns, of course. So we've seen a lot of different things in New Zealand. And one of the last things we saw was this cow barn, milk barn, and they like the murals too. Talked to the person who grew apples, lamenting how if one bruises on them, they throw away the whole bucket to it. We are very picky people and lucky that we do have choices. To facilitate our time, we decided to fly back from this side, the South Island, and we're at Blenheim where the airport was, and then fly to Auckland where we got our big plane home. And that saved a day and a half of travel there that we had put into on this side. So that's pretty well the end of our trip to New Zealand. And we left this fernland. This plant here with the fuzzy leaves gives me the warm, fuzzy feeling I have of being in New Zealand. It's wonderful people, it's beautiful scenery, it's an intriguing and safe place to be. So we flew off the islands, which you can see down below, and returned, as usual, to our dear friends in Moose Jaw. Thanks for being with us. Beth and I thank you for being here, and go with love. Bye now.